The heart monitor beeped steadily. A 6-year-old boy lay on the hospital bed, holding a worn gray stuffed animal, his face buried in the pillow. Outside the hospital room window, snow fell in thick layers, blanketing the grounds of St. Alder Private Hospital in Seattle. Marisol Reyes, the night shift nurse, quietly closed the door behind her, still holding the patient's medical chart. She had worked this job for 13 years. She had witnessed many deaths. She had helped patients through their most painful nights, but no pain was quieter than that of a child waiting for parents who never came. "Leo, it's bedtime," Marisol said, her voice as gentle as a breath. The boy didn't respond. His small body trembled. "Do you want me to read the superhero book again?" He shook his head. A single tear fell onto the pillow. Then he whispered, barely audible, "I don't want to bother them, but today's my birthday." Marisol's heart clenched. She said nothing. She simply walked to the bedside, sat down, and gently opened her arms. Leo hesitated. Then he rushed into her embrace as if it were the only thing in the world holding him together. That hug lasted 47 seconds. Afterward, Marisol kissed his hair. "You're not a bother, Leo. Someone wants to be here with you, and so do I." In the hallway, a small ceiling-mounted camera recorded the moment. There was no sound. Just the image of a nurse hugging a little patient in a hospital room on a snowy night. 3 days later. A call came from Human Resources. "Nurse Reyes, please report to room 604 at 10 a.m. tomorrow. The Chief of Medicine and the Executive Board will be present." No explanation. No written report. Marisol arrived on time, dressed in a clean, neat uniform. She had no reason to worry. Until the CEO spoke. "Our internal camera recorded you engaging in inappropriate physical contact with a minor patient, outside the scope of your professional role." "Inappropriate contact?" Marisol repeated as if she didn't understand the term. "You hugged a patient in the absence of a legal guardian. That violates St. Alder Private Hospital's Code of Conduct. We have decided to suspend you indefinitely. We are also considering reporting the incident to the State Nursing Board." The room fell silent. No one looked her in the eye. No one mentioned the boy's name. No one asked her why she did it. Not a single person acknowledged it was his birthday. After the meeting, Marisol walked out, slowly. No yelling, no defense, because she was already familiar with the silence of so-called professional spaces. That night, back at her 2-bedroom apartment in the south end of the city, Marisol opened the fridge and pulled out leftover rice and a thawed slice of salmon. Her 12-year-old daughter, Camilla, was doing homework at the kitchen counter. "You're home," Camilla said without looking up. "I'm taking a few days off," Marisol said. "Why?" "Time to rest a little. I'm tired." On the table, an unpaid electricity bill sat beneath a pile of hospital documents. Her night shift salary wasn't enough. To raise a child, pay off nursing school loans, and cover the hospital bills left behind by her late husband. But that night, Marisol didn't cry. She just stared at the suspension letter and whispered, "All I did was hug a child." Fast forward to the same night. On the 3rd floor, in the room next to Leo's, Thomas Everhart, an anonymous patient, 79 years old, partially paralyzed from a stroke, sat silently, staring out the window. He hadn't slept that night, and he had seen everything, through the small crack in his door, and he cried. For the first time in 5 years. 6 a.m. Thomas sat in his wheelchair, hands resting on his knees, eyes fixed on the hospital window, where the sun had not yet fully broken through the dawn. The room was still dark, filled only with the soft hum of the oxygen machine. No one knew he had stayed awake all night. No one even knew who he was, because on his patient file the last line read, "Status, no known family. Identity, confidential by request." 15 years ago, the name Thomas Everhart appeared on every major medical news outlet. Founder of Everhart Health, a multi-billion-dollar private hospital chain across the U.S., he was once celebrated for his humanistic philosophy: care for others as if they were your mother. Then he vanished. After a major stroke, he withdrew from public life. The media assumed he had died, but no one had proof. The truth was that he was here, inside the very hospital that bore his name, like a ghost observing quietly. 4 weeks earlier, he had been rushed to the ER after a minor stroke while living in seclusion at a suburban care home. Normally, internal protocols would have returned him to a private residence with full-time care. But he refused. "Take me to the Seattle hospital, the ward for unregistered patients. I want to see my hospital, through the eyes of those no one notices." The request was approved. No one dared deny it. And that night he witnessed Marisol Reyes hug a crying child. No lectures, no medical devices, just a hug. And to him it was more powerful than any treatment ever invented. 9 a.m. the next morning. Thomas requested to be wheeled down to the hospital's medical library. The young orderly hesitated. "Are you sure, sir? That area is off limits to regular patients." Thomas gave a faint smile. "Why don't you check if I'm just a regular patient?" In the library, he navigated to a secured digital archive. He typed in a command only a few still remembered: Everhart level access /admin bypass /archive, Marisol Reyes /incident review. A video began to play, night camera footage, room 412. Marisol sitting beside Leo, holding him quietly under the dim light. Thomas fast-forwarded, then paused at the precise moment the nurse's arm wrapped around the boy. Slow, gentle, without obligation, without fear. He printed a still image from the footage and slipped it into an envelope. "I once said something when I opened my first hospital," he muttered. "If you can't heal with medicine, then heal with humanity." He called his former assistant, now an executive board member. "Convene an emergency meeting this afternoon. I want to speak." "About what?" "About a patient, and a nurse you just harmed." Meanwhile, at a small cafe near Marisol's neighborhood, she was working a side shift, pouring coffee, wiping tables, smiling at customers. A middle-aged woman leaned in and whispered, "I remember you. You took care of my mother. Thank you." Marisol smiled faintly, but her eyes were red. In a corner booth, a young boy sat with a social worker. It was Leo. He turned toward her, eyes lighting up, ready to run over, but the worker held his hand. "No contact outside visitation hours." Leo looked down. Marisol gave a small nod, a silent greeting from afar. No one said anything, but some glances speak louder than words. That afternoon, the entire executive board was summoned. The chairman, legal advisors, and PR directors were all present. Thomas sat in the center of the glass-walled conference room on the top floor, the very place where 15 years ago he had cut the ribbon at the grand opening. On the large screen, the video of Marisol and Leo was played. Then Thomas turned around, his voice clear and firm, without a microphone. "This is the most humane moment I've witnessed in this hospital in 15 years. And you fired her. Not because she did something wrong, but because you were afraid of policy, of liability, of image." The entire room fell silent. A board member pushed back gently. "Mr. Everhart, we understand your emotions, but policy is policy." Thomas gave a cold smile. "Policies are made by people, and I'm the one who built this hospital. If this place no longer has room for a hug, then take my name off every sign." He left the room. I didn't wait for a reply. Behind him, the board sat, frozen, speechless. Monday, 11:04 a.m. Marisol had just washed her hands after her backup shift in the kitchen of a small restaurant near Little Havana. She was about to leave when the restaurant owner called out, "Someone's asking for you at the door. Didn't give a name, but I think you should meet him." Marisol stepped outside, still in her flour-dusted apron. Under the sharp sunlight, a black sedan was parked a few feet away. A man in a dark suit approached. "Ms. Reyes, I'm Mr. Everhart's assistant. He'd like to invite you for tea at his private office." She froze, eyebrows furrowed. "Mr. Everhart, I don't know him." "He knows you." 30 minutes later, Marisol stepped into a private office on the top floor of the hospital. Everything was minimalist. No awards, no diplomas on the walls. Only black and white photographs, healthcare workers smiling, holding patients, wiping the brows of the dying. In the center of the room sat Thomas in his wheelchair, hair silver, dressed in a simple shirt. "You don't have to stand so straight, I'm no one important anymore," he said gently. Marisol sat down. Her hands tightened under the table. "I don't understand. Why did you call me?" Thomas pulled a printed photo from an envelope. It was the camera still, her and Leo in that silent embrace. "I used to believe the most important thing in medicine was skill. But that night when I saw you do this, I remembered what keeps people alive is believing they are not invisible." Marisol looked down. Her throat tightened. "I didn't do anything special. I just hugged a child." Thomas stared at her for a long time. "Then, the saddest part is that today, something like that is considered special." Silence settled. Thomas leaned back slightly in his chair. "I have a proposal, but not a job offer. I want you to lead a new unit, a place where a hug isn't punished, where patients are seen as people, not bed numbers." Marisol looked at him, skeptical. "You mean a new center?" Thomas nodded. "A place called the Human Wing, and I want you to be its founding director." Marisol stood, walked toward the door. Her hand touched the knob, then paused. "I don't have a master's degree. I have no money, no influence, and I was just fired for hugging a child." Thomas responded calmly. "You have what medicine is missing. The courage to be kind, even if it costs you everything." 3 days later, Marisol received an official invitation letter. At first, she considered tearing it up, but then Leo sent her a handmade card, written in messy, crooked letters. "Dear Miss Marisol, today the doctor let me go out to the garden, but no one hugged me. Are you still mad at me?" For the first time in weeks, Marisol cried. She called Thomas. "If I say yes, I want to pick my team. No top-down assignments." "Agreed," he said without hesitation. "Choose people from the basement, not the penthouse." A few weeks later, a separate wing of St. Alder Hospital was renovated. Gone were the cold white walls. Gone were the sterile hallway signs. In their place, soft golden lights, gentle music, photos of patients and their families lining the corridor. The Human Wing officially opened. Not a treatment ward, but the first space in the Everhart health system that allowed compassion is not a luxury in healing. 4 weeks after the grand opening, every room was full. Patients came not just for treatment, but to be called by name, to be told stories, to be remembered. Leo, now laughing, drawing, even keeping a journal. One day he wrote, "I don't dream about the ER anymore. Now I dream of Miss Marisol taking me to the park." But the storm was brewing. An article in the Medical Ethics Journal began circulating rapidly. Headline: "Medicine or Emotion? A hospital unit disregards medical protocol in the name of humanity." The author, a former board member, one who had voted to fire Marisol. In the article, he criticized, "A hug is not a medicine. A smile does not replace a diagnosis, and emotions cannot be billed to insurance." That morning, Thomas sat in his office, rereading the article. Marisol entered holding a printed copy. Her face was calm, but her eyes sharp as a scalpel. "Do you want me to respond?" she asked. "No," Thomas replied. "I want you to speak to those who are listening. Not with your mouth, but with your heart." That evening, an internal conference was held at Everhart Health. Nearly 200 doctors, nurses, and administrators from across the system gathered. Marisol wasn't on the guest list, but she came anyway, as an unofficial guest. Amid formal speeches about clinical efficiency, Marisol stood. "Excuse me," she said, loud and clear. "I'm not a doctor. I don't have prestigious degrees, but I have a story." The room turned toward her. She told the story of the first night she met Leo. No ventilators failed. No medical emergency occurred. But a child cried in the dark because he believed he wasn't worth waiting for. She paused, looked at every person in the room. "And I did what this system taught me not to do. I sat down, I hugged him. And you fired me for it." No one spoke. Marisol continued. "So let me ask, if a nurse is not allowed to hug a suffering child, then are we running a hospital or a factory that manufactures services?" The first applause broke out, then more, and soon the entire auditorium was on its feet. After that night, an internal survey was sent to over 4,000 healthcare workers across the Everhart Health system. It asked a single question: do you believe humanity is an essential part of healing? 97% answered yes. But outside pressure didn't go away. Investors began threatening to pull funding unless the human wing could prove its financial value. Marisol made a bold suggestion. "Open our doors to the media, but no press conference, no presentation. Let the patients speak for us." On that day, journalists were invited. No guided tours, no PR fact sheets. They were simply led into the community room, where Leo was teaching a young girl how to draw, and a 90-year-old patient told stories to 2 young nurses. No one talked about policies, but everyone could feel something real was being healed. The next day's headline was no longer a critique, not science, not technology, but kindness is what transformed an entire hospital. March, Washington, D.C. Marisol stood backstage at a grand hall, the venue for the National Health Conference. For the first time in its 47-year history, a frontline nurse with no advanced degrees was invited to deliver the closing address. On stage, her presenter was a small boy in a perfectly fitted suit, Leo. His voice trembled, but it was steady. "I used to think hospitals were where people went and never left. But one day, a nurse made me want to live again." The room fell completely silent. Leo turned to the side of the stage. "Now, I'd like to invite Miss Marisol." Marisol stepped onto the stage. No speech in hand. No slides behind her. Just a woman once fired for a hug. "I'm not here to talk about policy," she began. "I'm here to remind us of something that feels old-fashioned. Patients are not cases, not statistics. They are human beings. And what they remember is not the diagnosis, but your eyes when you looked at them, the way you said their name, the hug you gave when they thought no one would come." She told her story, not to ask for sympathy, but to reflect a truth. Healthcare has become so afraid of lawsuits that it's forgotten how to be human. "When I hugged Leo, I didn't cure his cancer, but I gave him something else, the feeling that he still mattered. And sometimes, between 4 drips and treatment plans, that feeling is what keeps people alive." The entire room rose to its feet. Not for the speech, but because they'd been waiting for someone to say this their whole careers. A week later, a short clip of her speech went viral on TikTok and Instagram. Over 28 million views in 3 days. The hashtag number sign Let Them Care exploded. A movement to protect compassion in healthcare. At the same time, Thomas Everhart recorded a video message for the entire Everhart health system. I spent my whole life building a medical empire, but my biggest regret is this. I forgot that kindness doesn't need a budget. From this day forward, across all Everhart hospitals, no employee shall be reprimanded for showing humanity to a patient. He formally stepped down from his last executive role and moved to a home near a pediatric recovery center, where Leo now attends music lessons each week. As for Marisol, she didn't choose to stay as director. Instead, she founded a new organization, the First Touch Foundation, training young nurses in compassionate care and supporting frontline caregivers battling burnout. In the same small room where it all began, the human wing, Leo, now a teenager, placed a new photo on the table next to the old one of himself being hugged. In the new one, he's the one giving the hug to a younger patient just starting chemo. I don't remember exactly what she said that night, Leo wrote in his journal, but I remember this. I didn't feel invisible anymore. A small act, like a hug, might not change a diagnosis, but it can change the person who carries it. Sometimes humanity doesn't need permission. It just needs to be allowed.